Good afternoon. I guess it's technically good afternoon. It's noon. My name is Max Willens. I'm a senior reporter at Digiday, and I am your host for this week's installment of The New Normal. This is a weekly conversation that Digiday has with leaders in media and marketing to discuss the future of their industries, the future of their roles, and future of the places that they work. My guests today are Ken Doctor and Jed Williams. Ken is the CEO of Lookout Local. Jed is the CRO of Lookout Local. For those of you that are not familiar, Lookout is a brand new company that was formally kind of unveiled to the world almost a year ago. And in about a month, will be launching its very first website, a local news product based in Santa Cruz. And they will tell you in much greater detail what Lookout Local is and why it exists and the mean for it. But I thought I would begin with a shameless plug. So those of you that are watching likely know about Digiday Plus, and some of you may even be members of Digiday Plus, but those of you who are not, let me tell you a little bit more about Digiday Plus and why you should join it. So those of you that read our content regularly have probably noticed that we have a paywall. It is a paywall that we are tightening, and a paywall that we think is really important. And I'm sure that some of you have run into it and felt sort of frustrated by it. Digiday Plus members do not see that paywall. They get unlimited access to our stories. They also get unlimited access to our exclusive content. I'm sure if you visited our homepage, you've noticed that we have a regular rotating bar of member exclusive stories. These include not just in-depth reporting on topics ranging from the future of TV to the future of programmatic advertising, but also they include exclusive research, which we do every week with a proprietary panel of leading people in both media and marketing agencies, publishing executives, brand side people. And we poll them regularly on all kinds of topics, not just questions related to strategy and revenue, but also questions about how they tackle issues related to diversity, inclusion, things like that. We also offer people regular guides and reports, which we publish, which are comprised not only of past reporting, but also insights gathered from people that we speak to. We also have regular live digital events. Eventually, when society gets back to something like normal, we have in-person events too, but we have live digital events. Every week we do something called a Digiday Plus Talk, which is kind of an in-depth presentation and how-to conversation guided by a leader in either media or marketing that walks through how they solved a thorny problem in their business. And you also get the Digiday magazine. That's a quarterly print product that we put together with our editorial staff and our fantastic art team. And we are really, really proud of it. And if you are not a Digiday Plus member, you are very lucky because by joining us today, you get a discount code. It's on the screen right there. It's TNN. You use TNN at checkout and you will save 20% on your membership. The shameless plug has now concluded, and now onto the show. Again, my guests today are Jed and Ken. Jed and Ken, say hi. They are on your screen somewhere.
Hello.
So
Good morning to those on the West Coast.
So let's start maybe with a little bit of kind of introduction. So I'm pretty sure anybody that has read or thought at all about the local news business at all in the last 10 years is familiar with Ken and is familiar with Jed. And you know, they know you guys, well, Ken in particular, as an analyst, someone who spent a long time thinking really intently and also doing a lot of great reporting too about what's going on in local news. And Jed also in your past life at local media association, doing a lot of really interesting stuff, trying to modernize and kind of revitalize the business side of local news. But both of you guys, up until very recently, Jed especially quite recently, had kind of gotten away from or out of the trenches and away from the pretty scary front lines of local news. So maybe I'll start with you, Ken. Like, why did you run back toward the front? This is it's a tough fight. So why did you do that?
I think I was pushed. And I think we'll just take your opening slide and put Lookout on it, because the business model essentially that I've been writing about for now 15 years, which is amazing. I became an analyst in 2005. And that's when I had left Knight Ridder newspapers in 2005, and I started doing what we called blogging back then, and decided I would concentrate fairly quickly on the business of news. So I've been doing it for 15 years. And then it came very clear within basically a dawning realization, but by a year and a half ago, it was pretty strong, that while I was an expert, and that's great to be quoted on the business of news, where I lived was an absolute worsening news desert in Santa Cruz, California, and not unlike so many places described by Penny Abernathy and others. And that the question, this kind of abstract question, or the questions I dealt with, were real here. So the question was, with a big white sheet of paper, literally, it's like, okay, if you do this in a place like Santa Cruz, affluent, educated largely, but a real news desert, what do you need to do to build something that is sustainable and growing? And that spurred me kind of putting the two parts of my head together there. And what was an intellectual exercise turned out to be, I feel compelled to do it, because even with what I've covered and all of what I see in a lot of local startups, I had not seen, until I talked to the Memphian, and we can talk about them in this time period. I had not seen somebody want to say, we want to be the primary news source. We're willing to replace Suicidal Daily, and we're going to do it to build this into the future. So I felt compelled to do it. And it has been harder, of course, than I thought in fundraising and all. And when I first described it to Jed a little more than a year ago, it was great to get that affirmation. And now it is great to have him joining us.
Yeah, Jed, I mean, maybe just as a follow-up, like what was it that sort of convinced you to do this? Yeah, what brought you over the line?
Sure. I mean, I think first off, just, personally, I'm a pretty entrepreneurial guy. I really have that streak in me. I think that's a lot of the work that I tried to embark on and lead at LMA over the past 4 years. But I think well beyond the personal statement was really the problems that we're looking to solve here are really important ones. They're vital ones, in fact. The time is now. There's an exigent need for it more than ever. And Max, I was uniquely privileged, I think, at LMA in the work that I and we were doing, because we were sitting at the nexus of all of these different media companies, traditional, new, and everything in between, that are experimenting with different things, that are trying their darndest to try to figure out the model for them moving forward. And it just became clear to me, and I enjoyed every minute of working with them and was passionate about helping them. But it just became apparent to me that I was actually in a really unique position. I think Ken equally in a unique position to go, look, we've been exposed to a lot of ideas here. We've been exposed to a lot of things that don't work, but we've also been exposed to some things that do work. And are we in a position with the right set of ideas culled together and the right team that we surround ourselves with to harness that and say, look, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all model, but that we can be optimistic, that there is potential for a for-profit, self-sustaining, primary digital news enterprise in smaller to mid-sized markets that, yes, can replace a lot of the work that the newspaper has done, but is a modern, fresh enterprise and a modern, fresh experience for a consumer and what they expect to consume and how they expect to consume it in 2020 and beyond. And so when you combine the ability to really be entrepreneurial here and the ability to take all of these learnings and go solve for something that I think so many of us feel passionately about, it was, to me, that was what was so compelling.
And it's Santa Cruz, which it's going to be a lot of fun.
And there's the fun part. Let's not lose the fun part. Actually, we actually, I'm joking about this, but Ken and I talk about it a lot, Max, which is, in media and particularly in local media, you don't really hear the word fun a lot. You hear consolidation and cutting and news desert and all these sinister, daunting terms. And yeah, it's going to be hard as heck, but we also want to create an experience that not only does great, accountable, credible work, but also it's fun to build, and it's fun for readers to enjoy as well.
When you said fun, I thought, oh my God, he did this just so we could be near the boardwalk.
Yeah,
I guess,
of course.
I thought I was sort of envisioning this as a conversation that would happen in sort of three parts, where we sort of dig a little bit more into the the form that you decided that this would take, kind of getting back to that whiteboard, then dig a little bit more into Santa Cruz and what, you can and can't learn about how to solve what, as both of you said, is a national and pressing problem. And then finally, maybe dig a little bit more into the partnerships that you've forged and maybe, stare into a crystal ball and do some reckless prognostication. And while we do this, I will be asking some questions that have been sent in advance by readers who knew that this was going to be an event that we did. But we have a chat function that's open. So if you do have questions, do feel free to dump them in the chat, and we'll either answer them as they roll in, or we'll save them toward the end, depending on the kind of momentum we've got going. So I want to start maybe just with the form that you decided that Lookout should take, because I think that I've spoken to a lot of people. I had the pleasure of talking to Chris Cruson for a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and one of the questions that I asked him was just about the idea that local news is sort of an institution in search of a business model. There's a lot of talk about nonprofit journalism. There's a lot of talk about is our paywalls going to save us? And you guys have landed on something that I will confess I'd never heard of before, but seems really smart and well suited to this purpose, which is a for-profit. Oh my God, I'm going to flub the name of it.
Public benefit company.
Thank you. Yes, a public benefit company. So walk me through what that is. Walk the readers through what that is and why you settled on that versus going nonprofit, which is something that I think has really dominated the conversation in local news over the last.
As in all things, I think startup, part of it is like great intention and part of it is accident. So I had this great conversation with Jake Shapiro, who is one of the great audio entrepreneurs of our time with PRX and Radio Public and others. And he was starting a new venture, and he said, I've got this form that I think really works, and it was a public benefit company. And so, public benefit company, the shorthand for it is B Corp like, in quotes. B Corp you have to apply for after you get going, and basically you're in business to serve a mission. Could be environmental mission, could be a social justice mission. In our case, you see it on this slide. We are in business to provide the news and information needs for our communities. So what this balances is it lets us be a for-profit company, which I've always liked the idea of. I worked for Knight Ridder and saw that with 18% profit margins, we could still do a great job of community service. Tony Ritter always wanted us to get up to 20%, but we got to 18%. And that the two could go hand in hand if you strengthen the newsroom with the profits you got. So it was, I want us to work at the speed of business. I want us to be part of the local business community that's already showing some results in a place like Santa Cruz. Also, the ability to interview and endorse candidates down the road, not this election, of course, but down the road, which a 501c3 can't do. And perhaps most importantly, we have built Lookout to be a transportable model. Both Jed and I are, very tuned to getting this first launch right in Santa Cruz. All effort is on that. But the idea is a transportable model that will take additional capital, and PBCs allow you to do that through grants or debt or equity. So it seems like the best position going into this.
So, and this is, you mentioned too, membership being sort of a key piece of this, but Jed, I'd ask you to maybe, what do you sort of see being the revenue opportunities for a venture like Lookout Local in a place like Santa Cruz? I know that for a time, LMA was very, very interested in kind of modernizing the approach to revenue and digital revenue in particular for local publishers, because on the digital side, for most local media businesses, they face a lot of headwinds, right? They're not ever going to be big enough that they can compete on a scale basis. It's very hard often to sort of keep up with the Joneses technologically. It's hard enough if you're in New York, but if you're in Kansas or Alaska, good luck finding someone who's good at programmatic advertising. So right. What does the revenue play look like for something like this?
Yeah, I thought you'd never ask. That's the first time I've thought about it. Actually, I think about it every morning and every night and everywhere in between. I feel like I'm a would-be mad scientist with revenue models at this point. But actually to answer that, I'll start by picking up on where Ken left off a little bit too, which is, do we think that philanthropy, Max, can be part of this model? Absolutely. Certainly, it can be part of it. It will be part of it. But I think one of the distinctions in saying we're going to be for-profit, we're going to be B Corp-like at the outset is to say it's a part of it, but it's not the prevailing revenue stream. And at the end of the day, we feel like to be a really quality operator, you have to be in control of your own business model. You have to be, you have to be self-sustaining. And to be overly dependent on philanthropy, I believe, and I think generally we believe, puts that at risk, as a risky proposition. The other kind of high level point, and this is one of the things that Ken and I are deeply aligned on, one of many, is, and this isn't meant to be a slight to others, Max, but we are starting with the business model as much as we're starting with the audience and content model. This isn't a try to build audience and field of dreams like the business will show up in the cornfields later and figure itself out. I am a huge proponent of the business model never figures itself out. You figure the business model out proactively from second one of minute one of the business. So I'll step off the soapbox. The way we think about the model is, and this sounds trite, but it's absolutely a truism. We think about revenue diversity. We think about smart, balanced revenue streams. With that being said, we're not going to chase shiny objects. There are things we could try to do at launch here in the months ahead that we purposely will not try because we may not be staffed to do it. And we have to think about where are really the places that we can win immediately and build upon. But ultimately, this model, Max, will start as a balanced model. It'll be about 50% reader driven and about 50% sponsor and business driven to start. Over the course of 3 years and 5 years, we see that shifting to a certain degree to be even more reader and audience driven and dependent, probably 60%, maybe even up to 70% coming from membership. Now, when we say membership here, we do mean an access model. So there are tenets of subscription, but the features, benefits, the way our membership model works, if I can borrow a term from Jay Rosen and the folks at Membership Puzzle Project, is very memberful. It's not just transactional, and we can get into some of the tenets of what that means. But ultimately, you're looking at a business model that's reader revenue driven, but still strongly supported by the business community, and then additionally augmented and supported by philanthropy and underwriters. But I want to make one point on the business part of it, the business community part of this, which is Ken and I are very much passionate believers that I say advertising, let's call it, I know Sean Griffey's on from Industry Dive, who I have great admiration for. And I know Sean talks about marketers. That's how we're talking about it too. This is marketing partnership. This is deep sponsorship. This is deep integration of a brand into a local and community experience. It's not trying to be or beat Facebook or Google because it cannot. So we're not going to try. It's not going to have programmatic advertising at the outset and likely for the long foreseeable future, Max, because of the dynamics that you mentioned. But with that said, we believe there are ad deserts that Ken can talk about this idea. There are ad deserts in local communities that need to be solved for local and regional businesses in the same way that there are news deserts. We want to build a product and experience that can uniquely solve for that too. And so this isn't one of these things where sponsorship and marketing is part of the model at the start because we need instant revenue and then it shrivels and goes away. The business community is part of the model along with readers and members for the long haul here.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe we can dig into the ad desert piece in a bit, but I'm curious in terms of the other side of this that's interesting too is, so Santa Cruz, the sort of addressable market, I guess, for this is this venture is what, 250,000 people-ish? Larger, smaller?
The total population is 275, and Jed, you figured the addressable at in the 200s, lower 200s, right?
About 230 is total addressable. Basically, to put it kind of bluntly, the buying community that we can reach, either to pay us directly for work or that would be buyers of brands that would be sponsors and marketers.
Got it. And you mentioned, you're hoping that at the outset membership is 50%. Are you, is there sort of a number that you need to get to with members to make this work? Is it, assuming, is it 2% of that market? Is it 3%? What's the,
It is depending on the school program. So there's a lot of moving pieces. So if it were just kind of vanilla individual one-to-one membership. We got to sell every rectangle I'm looking at on my Zoom screen, right? It would be between 5,000 and 7,000.
Okay.
It's really interesting in a county this small that digital publishing, and this is all, I mean, those of us on the panel and those participating by Zoom know these principles work nationally. So the question was, how does this work locally? It is still very cheap to do a digital product. So at less than $2 million a year, we can mount a full service news company that has 2 to 3 times the reporting strength, just in quantity, not talking about quality, of the daily newspaper here.
That's
So
really
with that number, you can do a lot. And when we talk about ad desert, there is more money in advertising than we thought going into this. So that's been one of the interesting quick learnings of this, is that while it's a news desert, it's an ad desert. Marketers are saying, I will talk to them, and Jed will talk to them, and they'll say, thank you so much for telling us about your new company, because we really don't have a place to reach our customers given the media desert, essentially. So we'll see if it's 50-50, if it's 60-40, but to the whole point of diversification, if we do this right, we can get both of those, and then events will come back someday.
Just to add a quick point on that, to add a little bit more sort of empirical data. First off, to Ken's point, Max, about getting to something like 5,000 paying members. Let's just call them individual members here, not coming through group, or not coming through schools programs, which is something that we will have and we can talk about. But 5,000 individual members is about 2% of the addressable audience in Santa Cruz County. I tend to be of the mind, now granted, you look at digital subscription uptake with newspapers and a lot of them are at 1% or below. I get it, 2% is, compared to that, seems ambitious. But in a local market where you're doing a primary news model with the degree of journalism, of community connectedness, et cetera, that we're doing from the start and building upon, I'm of the belief if you can't do 2%, like what are you doing? 2%, 5,000 feels like a reasonable number to us, or bigger than that. But also, to Ken's point, if you smartly bring in the business community and advertisers and marketers, I mean, what's the whole reason from a business model standpoint you do that is to mitigate, you diversify your streams and you mitigate your risk. And so there's a lot of ways for us to get to 5,000 or more paying members. There are also a lot of other ways for us to supplement the business model so that we're not overly dependent on 2% needing to be 4% or 8% or something that feels unwieldy, because we've gone about, hopefully smartly putting together a business model where all of these things complement each other.
Yeah, I think that, and on that point about complementary nature, we can use that as a way to dive a little bit into membership, and then I'll ask you about ad deserts, and we can hopefully roll that into a conversation about Santa Cruz as kind of the market and the place where this is all gonna, the laboratory where this experiment's gonna be conducted. Tell me about the membership. I mean, I think I've talked with you, Jed, at least a half dozen times about the difference between subscription and membership, and the sort of, merit of thinking about them as distinct things, and also the merit of membership in a community and small environment like a local news context. So why membership, and what's in yours, assuming that's been ironed out?
Ken, you want to start, and then by the way, the ironing board is still out. We're always ironing on it, but I think the shirt is a little bit more pressed and starched than it was a few months ago.
You can start. You can describe it. Describe the
Sure. I mean, I think we want to be clear and transparent. I mean, like I said earlier, it is an access model. Not everything is going to be openly free. There will be some things, by the way, that are always accessible to everyone in the community. And Ken and I and our team are still figuring out what those things are, and that may change over time. But I think you can think about things like information related to community organizations, civic orgs, newsletters, guides, events, and then critical public service and public health things are the kind of things that would be generally open and accessible to all. And then you'd have member-only content that's deep original reporting and exclusives and things like that. So I just wanted to note that up front. When you look at our membership program, though, overall, and I'm not going to go into all of the specifics because some of them are still baking, and some of them we really want to test, and it's kind of some of our sauce, our hypotheses that we're putting to practice here. But really, a big part of this, Max, is certainly it's things like being deeply connected to our correspondents. I don't think that's new to membership. A lot of people are doing that. Can we do it really well? Can we build a community of our members with our correspondents and with our team and with each other that's enriching to them? That's not new or novel, but it's really important here. Can we also do things that enable a member to really feel like a brand lover and a brand ambassador, where they feel empowered to go out, and sure, it helps our business, but they feel empowered to go out and tell others. There's value for them in doing it, but also we've created such a rich experience that they're inspired to do it. But I think the other thing here is, and I won't go into total detail, but this notion of how can Max Willens paying Lookout a certain amount of money a month or annually to be a member, how does that also allow you to enrich your community directly, to support civic organizations and community groups, to support businesses that you care about, maybe even to support your employer and corporate responsibility initiatives that they have? We've got some really big ideas. One of the things I think Ken and I are most excited to test is it sounds fun and idealistic to talk about the notion of community and putting community first, and we're going to do it. But can community at the center of your model also be good business practice and good for your business? And we think that if we create membership around the notion of you as someone who wants to be invested in your community, who wants to be a more vibrant member of your community, who wants to help your community solve problems and grow, whatever that might mean, giving you the ability to participate in that and contribute to that directly through a membership, we think there's something potentially special in that to test. And that will be part of a membership program here that I think is very different than a transactional, give me a certain amount of money or a credit card to just access my content kind of thing.
Makes a lot of sense. So sorry.
I just add to that. Yeah, it's interesting. I've had discussions with, for instance, the New York Times over the years, and say, like, you're calling it subscription. Why aren't you calling it membership? And the Times, being the Times, said, essentially, we don't want to get too close to people. We want them to value what we have, but we're concerned about what that implies. And I understand that. And they apparently have done quite well with it. But on a local level, and I've been a managing editor of a local newspaper, on a local level, this is very different than national models in the Times. You are close to people. There is no getting away from it. And that editor is going to be bombarded by people locally. So it is twofold. It is transactional in saying we're giving you a big enough and good enough product, but it is the kind of support that Jed talked about, where if we are authentically, and that's the key word, serving this community, we expect to be able to say transactional plus community support, and that equals membership.
Yeah, and that's I'm really glad Ken added that, because that's this notion, Max, of community betterment. And community betterment as our core charter certainly means informing residents and citizens of all types, ages, ethnicities, backgrounds, et cetera, of what they need to know. But it's also empowering them and activating them to help them make decisions and help them act on that information. It's not telling them what to do, but it's giving them the power, the information, the stimulus to be able to go out and act in ways that help them feel like they're playing a direct role in improving their community.
So I want to maybe dig into the coverage that you have planned, which is, going to sort of be at the heart of all of that. So we've got up here, this is a slide which I presume we got from you guys. We didn't make it up. Just sort of covering what I imagine are sort of the 9 coverage areas that the reporting staff at launch will have. Talk to me a little bit about how you settled on these, and also I'm going to take this as an opportunity to sort of weave in a couple of questions that people sent in. So this is going to be sort of a lot that I'm throwing at you, but the first being, how, when you're building a local news business, especially and granted you're entering sort of a news desert, so maybe this won't be something you have to worry about from the jump, but how you're thinking about the balance between creating stuff that's substantive versus stuff that's sort of grabby and maybe not clickbaity, but sort of light on nutrients and high on sugar, so to speak. And then
Mhm.
secondly, since I know you guys are in the middle of hiring reporters,
Yeah.
this looks a little bit like something where you'll hire folks who have a kind of high degree of autonomy to sort of own these beats on their own. And so I'm wondering, what you guys think about when it comes to sort of the skill sets that you're looking for. There was are you looking for people that can, I don't know, shoot video, or do you want data journalists, or just people who are really good at, digging up scoops, basically? Like, what's the sort of skill set that you're looking for? And that's a
So,
lot, so attack it
no,
with a
it's a lot.
report.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we are, those words are major, and we're trying to live up to them. We want to be the primary news source. So it'd be nice to be able to say we're going to cover this and this, but we're going to let somebody else cover that and that, because that and that's not getting covered. And so, really key to the whole value proposition is that first slide when you saw those 9 rectangles. That we're going to be essentially a news of record site, which is an obligation. And we will cover government. So government is where all of the local press starts, of course, and we'll have major accountability unit. A couple of people, we are allied with the First Amendment Coalition in Palo Alto, which is a open records, open meetings, advocacy group, legal health group for press and public. So we are right in there doing what traditionally local publications do. And then, and this is my features background as much as my news background, it is not, although news people think of features as the toy store, we think of this as city life. City life, especially in a place like Santa Cruz, but anywhere, is not just about problems or a list of headlines. It's about the city itself, its characters, and we want to encompass that. So Max, to the point you're making, we are looking for talent who understands that it's not just a matter of describing problems and going to meetings, but the opportunity, and especially if they can bring topical knowledge in health, education, environment, other areas where they know that stuff, they can have intelligent conversations in the community, and they can report fairly and fully, both nonpartisan and connecting the dots. That's the kind of talent that we are looking for. And it's really a kind of standard of journalism that I'd like to bring back to an area like this. So it's not just volume, and we all report on the loss of jobs. It is the kind of reporting that we do. And we want to respect people's intelligence, give them fact, but also connect the dots. And so, yeah, it is. We're very picky in hiring. We have our jobs up on Indeed and other places, but we really want to hire people who buy into this vision and then want to really build on it.
Yeah. Just I guess one quick thing to add on that too is this notion of, Max, we're calling them correspondents. But really, like, these are people, to Ken's point, they need to have expertise in a topical area or in a beat. They're not just generalists. They're not just cub reporters. And ultimately, like, they're going to live and breathe in the community, deeply embedded with the community, talking to the community constantly. And they're going to have a brand. I mean, yes, at the end of the day, they represent the Lookout brand, but they will have a brand. They will be a subject matter expert. Community members will have face-to-face, name and face relationships with them, whether you're a paying member or not. And I think you can think about, where we get influence like that from. You get it from Do Correspondent, you get it from The Athletic. Look at what different model than The Athletic, but The Athletic has done a remarkable job of building and extending upon and leveraging the brand of those reporters and the individual followings and credibility that they build to then, by extension, deepen the affinity that somebody has for the brand because of the affinity they have for the reporter or the correspondent. There's some of that influence in how we think about it.
I'm just endlessly distracted by the use of Ta-Nehisi Coates is in the thumbnail of that mock-up. I think that's fantastic. So I hope that you guys are going to find the next Ta-Nehisi Coates. Look out, guy.
I'll add to the job description right when we get done.
So I want to ask a little bit about Santa Cruz as a market. I mean, I joked about the boardwalk, and we talked a little bit about how there's a lot of kind of easy opportunity potentially, relatively speaking, in the ad market, because there is a large part of that community that's very well heeled, very well educated, and businesses within the community that would certainly like to get themselves in front of those people. But the aspiration for this, as I understand it, is to sort of extend out and also do Watsonville and also do the kind of the county as a whole. And so I'm wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about how you imagine balancing the coverage there. And well, yeah, answer that question first, then we'll ask a little bit more about a separate big picture question.
Sure, and this is a familiar to me from my whole experience with Knight Ridder. What a newsroom does is it follows its mission, which should be to cover the whole community, introduce different communities to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I was just doing some work on this. In fact, last night you mentioned Watsonville. This is a city in the southern part of the county. It's only got 10,000 fewer people than the city of Santa Cruz that everybody knows because it's a big tourist destination. And Watsonville is heavily Latinx in population. In pre-COVID times, even 3 times the unemployment rate, health and education disparities, and guess what? More of a news desert than even Santa Cruz. So we have a commitment to covering that, the nature of the staff, in addition to all the other qualities we talked about. We're looking for bilingual staff, and the cover of the stories there. So we will do that because that's what we do. We will, of course, get our ad money and we'll get our membership money from whoever wants to provide it, basically as the value proposition that they see. And there's not really a conflict in there. That's how media has always worked. It is simply, this is how we're going to do it digitally. A key part of this for me has been, it was an interesting exercise to sketch out what the plan could be. The hard part was getting the capital. And you mentioned Chris Cruson early on with Lion, and we had a further discussion when we announced our launch last week, and Chris was part of it, about this nature of the landscape. I was able, after a lot of talks, to raise enough money to do this at a big enough scale. And this is what's really important, both to the mission. It's one thing to say we want to cover South County, but if you don't have the money to pay people to do it, it's not going to work. So we raised enough money, and that's a big question about our really experiment and our model. Can you, if you do it big enough, do the kind of coverage that resounds all over the community and earns its way forward, both in ad and membership dollars? And that is our bet. And over the time that I've covered this area and I've worked in starting this up, only the Memphian in Memphis has been similar in saying, we think we can be the primary news vehicle, and they have a Gannett Daily, which is much more than the failing Alden Daily we have in Santa Cruz.
So I want to pivot again also to talk a bit more about in the way in which Santa Cruz is and is not instructive, because as you point out, like, this is sort of the first place that you're going to try to make this work, but the aspiration is to have it work in lots of different communities. I'm wondering, maybe I'll just give you the floor here to tell me a little bit about that. I mean, in one way, you have to, if you're going to see if seeds will grow, you have to plant them in arable land. So a lot of what we've discussed, I think, makes Santa Cruz quite arable and quite viable as a place to test it. But like, what in your sense, like, or in your thinking, how much of what you learn here will be applicable broadly? Like, is there a way in which Santa Cruz is kind of a Goldilocks market to do this in? Like, what's your sense of that?
So my guess on a percentage will be 83 to 87%, but we'll see. I mean, part of that is based on, when we first described this to people, and still last week I was getting the questions, well, is this like patch? And it's kind of like, no, this is not your father's or grandfather's patch. This is the idea that intensive local reporting and business relationships are key to rebuilding the local news business. So that being said, and I found this in my fundraising, this is not something that you achieve a 50% efficiency on by taking it to a next market. There's probably about a 15% efficiency, and that's largely in the platform, which we are partnered with the LA Times as a strategic partner, their graphene content management system. We are building the product once, and it will be skinned to another area. And of course, the topics that we cover and the emphases that we might have in another community are totally flexible. But the power of both the content and the business platform are there. So that will be quite helpful. And I think that the lessons are going to be quite transportable, as long as we understand that any community that, and we've been pitched by a number of communities already say they want to look out, and we say, whoa, not yet. As long as we're sure that we understand what drives the community, what makes a community different, hire the right local people as well as national people, I think it's quite transportable, because the problems are not unique in Santa Cruz. They are just a little different, as they are a little different everywhere.
Just if I can, I'll just add to that. I think it's a really key point, which is there are certain roles in this model, Max, whether we go to one other market or 100 other markets eventually. We'll go to one before we go to 100. But there are some roles in this model that will always be local roles in a market. They have to be. To Ken's point earlier, that's what's been missed all of these years, this notion that you can centralize everything and still be a primary news source, an information and community source with the relationships across the totality of that community to serve that community the way it needs and deserves to be served. So any next market we would go to, whatever market that is, whenever that might be, the content, the on-the-ground editorial newsroom content roles, like those have to overall live and breathe in that market. The efficiencies come from, as Ken described, technology, marketing to a certain degree, in smart ways, centralized staff. But I think it's really important that people know, if and when this expands to a next community, that next community will be served by people that know and live and breathe and walk and work in that community. The other thing I would just note is, just as a pure numbers game here. So Santa Cruz is 276,000 people, 230,000 addressable. We talked about that earlier. Just look at the map of the number of metros and submetros in this country alone that are between, let's say, 200,000 and 700,000, 750,000 people, and then map that to their news ecosystem. See who owns the newspaper, see how many full-time reporters are in that community, see what other surrounding media is around them. Do they have a commercial television station or multiple, or is that a county or two over? Do they have a real original reporting coming from public radio and public media, or is it being shipped from the top 25 metro 2 hours away? These are markets that are big enough to deserve and need a fulsome news ecosystem. They're also markets that have distinctive identities. Santa Cruz might be 45 minutes away from San Jose and an hour and a half away from San Francisco, but I've learned enough to know it has its own distinct identity. To cover it as if it's a bedroom community of San Jose is not only disingenuous, but incorrect. And there are lots and lots and lots of examples of that coast to coast. And we see that as really a big, whether we do all of it, and it's not just going to be us, but I think for a lot of people, entrepreneurs that want to solve for these problems, that is a huge unmet need and opportunity in this country.
Interesting. So you touched on graphene, which I'm going to use as sort of the segue into the final thing that I want to talk with you guys about. And then if there are questions from the audience, there's a couple that I haven't hit yet from a list as well. We'll get to those. So you mentioned graphene. There are lots of CMSs and publishing platforms that local news can look at these days. So much, and it's so much a need that there are now companies whose whole raison is CMS for local news, essentially. Tell me a little bit about how you settled on graphene versus Merrill Brown's business or ARC, or tell me a bit about that.
So what we wanted to, importantly, it goes back to, again, my reporting. I looked at companies, and I got numbers from newspapers. You looked at the newspaper model. The newspaper model is 12.5% of expenses go to the newsroom, and 87.5% go elsewhere. When I started talking to BuzzFeed and Vice and Vox, 5-8 years ago, They say, well, yeah, 60% essentially goes to content, could be 70% content and product. You could see that critical difference that you have a company that puts its money in what it serves readers and also has focus on what it needs to do rather than all this other stuff. So with technology, the question was, how do we get technology that enables, and I think we showed on several of the slides there, shows a highly visual experience. So again, this isn't a list of headlines. This is meant to be a city site that has a lot of news flowing through it. And how do you do that in a way that really minimizes workflow? So Meg gives the editorial staff the tools that they need to create that content quickly, yet fits into templates that are very pleasing to a wide range of customers, including younger readers. And out of all of that, graphene has appeared the best, and it's been a great experience as we're building the product with the LA Times. So that process has worked, and it's basically, either you outsource technology or you insource it. We do not want to have a big IT staff. We don't want to develop things on our own. Where we start with graphene is a really powerful system, especially, they got, I think, 500 journalists in the LA Times newsroom. We will have 8 to 10 to start out with, but we enjoy all the benefits of what they built over the last 2 years. And as we want to further develop, whether it is specials or guides or whatever, they are there for us. And we think that that is the best possible relationship. We can focus on really 3 things: content production, revenue production, and product roadmap.
Mm.
I think our hope, like we saw some of the mocks earlier in the design specs, I hope people, these are obviously the graphene and LA Times specs, but you look at the Lookout early designs, and I think we want people to look at that and go, wow, that doesn't look like a traditional newspaper. It does the job as a primary news source, but man, that thing is colorful. It's easy to read. It's easy to use. It's easy to share. Most importantly, it's mobile. Starting with that, like that is the kind of reading and consumption experience whether I am a 60-year-old, a 20-year-old, whatever it might be, that I would enjoy in 2020. So we want it, you see it here. We want it to be, and this is early, but this is what we've been going for from scratch, which is vibrant, colorful, swipeable. There's the Instagram qualities to it. There's a lot of, we hope, modernness and really digital modernness in this experience, where not only is it a digital only product, but somebody looks at that and says, that's not a 2020 product trying to be something else from a previous time. That's a 2020 product built for 2020 for the way news, information, and community consumers locally actually want to consume day to day. But it delivers the content experience with credibility, the authority, the connectedness that Ken talked about earlier, that goes beyond what exists today.
Makes sense. So, and I guess this we're coming up on the end of our time here. So I want to ask a little bit about sort of where you see local news, capital N, capital L, going. And I think one way I'll maybe just to at the risk of torturing it, like start with the partnership with the LA Times. It's not the only one. You guys have forged a lot of, I think, very shrewd partnerships with a bunch of different organizations. I think we have a slide of that as well. And I guess I'd love to get your thoughts on like the extent, the kind of like interconnectedness that local is going to have with national news broadly. So there was a lot of really interesting conversation at the end of last month, spurred by Josh Benton and then later Tony Hale, talking about these kinds of proposals where something like the Washington Post or the New York Times might serve as kind of a hub for lots of kind of local / national news subscriptions. There's also, I think, a lot of people talking about, just confining it to that. Like, do you think that, broadly speaking, that local news, the sort of like coming version of it, will involve more kind of close ties to larger organizations, whether it's something like the Post or the Times, or even something like, the Knight Foundation? What are your thoughts on that prospect?
I think it's way early to say that. I think that if we step back from this, a local news site is going to live or die on its direct relationship with local people. So there are a lot of advantages, and our relationship with the LA Times has been great, and it's been great to see it actually in practice on the site, and these other national partners, and then Cal Matters, which is the Texas Tribune of California. Um, so this is an and. We need to be, I've used the term intensely local, relentlessly local. This needs to feel like and authentically be about Santa Cruz County. At the same time, editorially, what's really important is that it not be parochial. I had a conversation with somebody locally yesterday who was very frustrated and said, like, we have a big homeless problem here. And she said, people start and they go like, well, what could we do with a blank board, rather than looking at what so many other communities have tried, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. So by bringing in national, state, national content and doing that selectively, this is not a fire hose from Kaiser Health News or Marshall or Cal Matters, but selectively saying these stories apply to Santa Cruz and the LA Times, of course. That makes a lot of sense. The ability to, for instance, bundle, as Josh and others were talking about, is a really attractive one, but it's difficult. And I've talked to the Times and Post about this, as an analyst over the years. We will experiment with the LA Times on a bundle of essentially a subscription and a membership, subscription to the Times, membership to Lookout. And we'll see how well it works. But that is not the main focus. The main focus has got to be intensely local, and at the same time use these national resources in a way that makes sense to readers. And that's going to be the key here. And I'm very excited about this because I haven't seen this kind of pulled together. You look at these logos of Inside Climate and Marshall and others, they are all foundation funded. What do they want? They want audience. The foundations want them to have audience, and we can be a local distribution node for them. And then we're also going to say to our readers, you like this stuff? Become a member of the Marshall Project, not just Lookout, and give them money. So we're trying to create here a new ecosystem, one little place to start out with, and say, this is wonderful what these high hundreds of journalists are doing. How do we connect it up in a way that makes reader sense? So this will be a fun experiment to see in place over 2021.
That's really interesting. So I guess just as a final thing, like, tell me if we do a version of this, a 1 year in TNN next year, what should we be looking for? What are you expecting this to look like 1 year in? How much of this, what are we looking at?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing, of course, is numbers. We want to build audience. We want to get that discovery, which isn't easy with anything new, and we're doing a lot on that, even 3 and 4 months out. And we want that engagement. And of course, we want the conversion numbers. We've been very conservative in our forecasting. I'd like to bust through them in terms of conversions to membership. And the other number, which is a squishier number, is an impact number. So while we have a controlled access model, essentially a paywall, we will have wide access through schools and other means. So how do we gauge the impact of our work, of our journalism? And so we want to look at those numbers. The other thing I would look at is, I hope that as we launch and we share numbers and all, that we can change a conversation nationally and expand it. I've had long talks with my friend John Thornton, American Journalism Project. It is wonderful what they're trying to do. They're good people trying to do good things, but they've said this is basically got to be nonprofit. It has to be without a paywall. We'd like to open up that conversation, and there are many other people in the country we found that want to open it up and say, this is a profound crisis. We need to bring the best models to this. And whatever successes we have with Lookout, I hope we change that conversation and people say, you can be mission oriented, and have a paywall and be a real business and have impact, let's consider that as well.
That's a nice note to end on, guys. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. I thank you both for making time for it, and yeah, thank you both very much. Before anybody signs off, I want to throw one last shameless plug in. As I mentioned, this is a weekly conversation that we have. Next week, our president and editor-in-chief, Brian Morrissey, will be back, and he will be interviewing High Snobiety co-founder Jeff Carvalho. That's going to be a great conversation. I look forward to tuning in. I hope you do too. You can register and send questions in advance at digiday.com/TNN. Thank you guys very much. Enjoy your week.
Thanks, Max. Talk to you soon.
Good talk.